Now to the horrific attack on two National Guard members in Washington the day before Thanksgiving. There is an encouraging update. The surviving Guardsman, 24-year-old Andrew Wolf, is on the slow road to recovery. West Virginia's governor just said that he gave nurses a thumbs up and that he started wiggling his toes in response to a question. All those are good signs, and it's a huge relief for his family. Meantime, the family of 20-year-old Sarah Beckstrom is mourning her death. She died of her gunshot wounds a day after the shooting. President Trump announced the news of her death.
Sarah Beckstrom of West Virginia, one of the Guardsmen that we're talking about, highly respected, young, magnificent person. Started service in June of 2023. Outstanding in every way. She's just passed away. She was savagely attacked. She's dead.
We are now getting a clearer picture of the suspect behind that attack, of both his background and his alleged mental health issues. That suspect is 29-year-old Ramanullah Lakanal from Afghanistan. He previously served in a prestigious CIA-backed Afghan unit called the Zero Units. There is still no known motive for the attack, but a reporter from Rolling Stone magazine was working on a documentary about these Zero Units. He says that people who served alongside Lakanal said that he had a hard time finding work in America and suffered from ongoing depression as a result. Lakanal also reportedly felt abandoned by the U.S. after having worked with the government for almost a decade. We'll speak to that reporter in just a moment. Lakanal was also brought to America in 2021 after the disastrous U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan. He was one of 3,000 Afghan nationals who were settled in Washington state, where he lived with his wife and his 5 sons. But emails from caseworkers who worked with Lakanal point to a marked change in his personality. He's not been functional as a person, father, and provider since March of last year, one email revealed. He spends most of his time for weeks on end in his darkened bedroom, not speaking to anyone, not even to his wife and his older children. Those emails also described long periods where Lakanal was unable to get work. They also noted manic episodes where he would take off in his car and of things that they called PTSD. At the White House today, the press secretary blamed the Biden administration for failing to properly vet tens of thousands of Afghan nationals who were brought here.
Reportedly, thousands of these strangers and unknown individuals were flagged to the Biden administration for national security, public safety, and fraud concerns. The Trump administration is now actively re-examining all of the Afghans imported into the country by Joe Biden.
While Lakanal entered the country on parole during the Biden administration, it was the Trump administration that granted him asylum a few months ago. Joining us now for more on this is Allie Bradley. Allie, the Department of Homeland Security thinks that Lakanal was radicalized in his years here at the U.S. Why do they think he was radicalized?
Yeah, so both DHS Secretary Kristi Noem and Attorney General Pam Bondi both saying that he was radicalized here in the United States after leaving Afghanistan. Now, Noem says they believe that it's because of connections through his home country that this radicalization happened, but they are talking right now to people who knew him and interacted with him, including his family members. Now, the 29-year-old, like you mentioned there, he was reportedly vetted by the CIA and the Counterterrorism Center before he entered the U.S. in 2021 as part of the Biden-era program, Operation Allies Welcome. But Noem said that the Biden administration didn't vet them, so they're doing that now. Take a listen.
Well, we're going back on all of these folks that have applied for asylum, people that would be traveling to this country, and looking at more information, what their social media platforms they may have visited, the communications that they have, biometric information and data that we can collect from them, but also from their government too. Much of our vetting process, in order to do it well, we have to have cooperation from the government. And if it's a country that doesn't have a stable government, that's difficult to do.
And all of that takes time, and the vetting was reportedly an issue across the board, especially from adversarial countries. A retired Border Patrol Sector Chief sounding the alarm on migrants from those 19 high-risk countries, the special interest countries like Afghanistan, highlighting a lack of vetting and even secrecy demanded under the Biden administration. Take a listen to what he said.
I wasn't allowed to put the increased numbers out. I wasn't allowed to put any information out into the media when we arrested somebody that was a special interest alien. With a country like Venezuela, if we're not dealing with them and they're not sending information that they have, then we're blind to that information.
So the roughly 2.5 million asylum seekers who poured in during the previous administration might actually face a different fate now. The massive group essentially protected under due process, but now the administration is pausing any new claims and reviewing millions of other cases. They could see those cases scrapped altogether and ultimately could be eligible for removal. Immigration experts say what the Trump administration is doing is legal for now, but could face some backlash if they keep this in place indefinitely. Now, when asked by reporters about the timeline on Air Force One yesterday, the president told our Libby Dean that they would hold this for, quote, a long time when it comes to those asylum claims being paused, because he said some of them are no good. Elizabeth.
All right, Allie Bradley. Some pretty intense rain there in New Orleans. Thanks for braving it for us. Joining us now is Rolling Stone contributor Kevin Maurer, who's working on a documentary on zero units, and former Marine Chad Robichaux, who served in Afghanistan and helped rescue Afghans who served alongside U.S. military. He's the author of Saving Aziz: How the Mission to Help One Became a Calling to Rescue Thousands from the Taliban. Chad, I want to start with you because you served in Afghanistan. You were on several deployments there. You helped rescue many of our Afghan allies who fought alongside you. So how carefully are these Afghans who served bravely alongside people like yourself screened before they come out and come to this country?
Yeah, I think it's really important, the distinction of who came here and how. There was a big NGO effort, non-government organizations, nonprofits that did a big rescue effort in response to the failures of the Biden administration during the withdrawal from Afghanistan. Those that came out with the NGOs were brought to third-party lily pad countries so that the U.S. State Department or state departments like around the world could vet them to see if they would go to their countries. Some came to the United States, some didn't. My interpreter, Aziz, for example, stayed in the United Arab Emirates for 9 months before he was able to come to the United States.
Okay, I'm sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
The other effort was the White House flying unvetted people, 80 to 100,000, that came straight to the United States, got off on U.S. soil, and just disappeared into the United States, and God knows who they are.
So varying degrees of vetting, and Kevin, I'm going to get to you in a second, but Chad, we do know that Lakanal served in one of these CIA units, these zero units. They were Taliban hunters. They were charged with finding and killing Taliban. Afghans assigned to those units were among the most heavily vetted. In fact, Republican Senator Mark Wayne Mullen once described these Afghans as the cream of the crop, the top of the top 1%. They were involved also in very intense combat.
Yeah, look, I worked primarily with Afghans. I did 8 deployments as part of a JSOC task force at Tier 1 Special Operations, and most of the people I worked with were Afghans. However, there's a big difference between vetting someone to be a combatant and fighting the Taliban. The enemy of your enemy is your friend, right? There's a big difference between vetting him for that and vetting him to come to the United States and be your neighbor. Okay. State Department's the process for that, not the vetting to fight in combat.
All right, Kevin, you were working for a long time on a documentary on these zero units, so you already had contacts with all these Afghans who participated. Your reporting shows that Lakanal was struggling with severe financial pressure and mental illness once he got here, that he seemed to have felt, quote, abandoned by the United States government. How so?
Well, I mean, I think it's the transition. These guys came from a war zone. They came straight into the U.S. culture. It's culture shock. It's trauma from the combat that they experienced, and honestly, it's just that natural transition, language barrier. So he was kind of struggling with all that on top of the fact that he didn't have the right immigration paperwork to secure employment to take care of his family.
Yeah, because he didn't. It was a paperwork thing. It wasn't that he was. For whatever reason, he was having difficult getting the paperwork fixed. And his unit mates tell you that he repeatedly asked the CIA for help, even as recently as June, because he was struggling to find work. He apparently posted in a group chat with a CIA representative, but nobody ever answered him, and the chat was deleted by the administrator?
That's correct. I mean, they all are facing some issues with their immigration paperwork, in part because they were a clandestine unit. And so getting approval from the government, the CIA acknowledging what they were doing, that they were employees of the CIA, has become a hurdle. There's all kinds of advocates like Famil that are working hard with these veterans to try to solve that hurdle. But I mean, some of this is paperwork, some of it's bureaucracy. But I mean, I don't think you can say that he wasn't vetted. He was vetted twice. He was vetted to get into the unit, and then he was vetted again when he got back before he got his asylum paperwork.
We also know that the financial pressures were pretty extreme. He worked for a time at a laundromat. Then he worked for a time delivering Amazon, driving his own car. And his friends tell you that he was having trouble buying enough food to feed himself and his family.
Yeah, it's not uncommon. I mean, it's difficult to get jobs. It's difficult, especially when you don't speak the language. These communities try to take care of each other, but every one of them is struggling in some ways. That's why they work these kind of jobs. And for him to lose his laundromat job, I mean, was a huge, especially with 5 kids and a family to support.
Chad, when we talk about when Kevin says he was vetted twice, 2 years ago, you actually describe an incident where you were working alongside an Afghan for months and months. You trusted him with your life, and he flipped on you.
Yeah, I had a guy. He was a OJA or CIA trained guy that worked on our team. His name was Bashir, and worked with him for 18 months. I spent the night on the side of mountains with him, and he flipped on us, and we ultimately had 12 of our teammates captured and killed because of him. A D-Bit was driven to my house. If you read my book, I was abducted by a foreign intelligence agency. It was because of that. But Kevin brought up a great point, because when these guys come here, however they come here, right or wrong, when they get here, they can't go to the VA for the things they dealt with. They don't have a system.
Right.
One of the things Mighty Oaks Foundation was, we created a system for them, but they don't. And so this guy, you have to think, he feels like the United States betrayed him. We withdrew from their country after however long, many years of fighting alongside their country. He's here driving an Uber or working at a laundromat, while his sister and mom may be back getting raped by the Taliban because we left. So there is certainly no excuse, but there is a recipe for disaster with how we have treated our wartime allies. And that's a real thing that we should consider in how we treat them moving forward.
Kevin, it's worth noting that the Zero units, unlike many other units that even Chad served in, the Zero units had zero incidents of friendly fire. In other words, they didn't have a single instance where the Afghan fighters in these Zero units turned on their American counterparts.
Right. When you talk to the CIA case officers who have worked with the Zero units, they point to the fact that their vetting process was so strong that they never had an insider attack. So nobody ever turned on them internally in their compound or on a mission. I think it speaks to the way that, you just didn't walk up and apply to be on a Zero unit. You had to be sponsored, then you went vetted, you were on probation. I mean, it's not simply, join up and sign up. You really are handpicked to do these kind of missions.
So I want you both to answer this question. Kevin, you first, and then Chad. When you hear the DHS say he was radicalized after getting to this country, was he radicalized, or was he just maybe suffering from PTSD, depression, and frustrated at having drawn what looked like to be a terrible lot in life at that point?
My reporting doesn't show he's been radicalized at all. I talked to his unit mates. They don't believe, or they have no indication or evidence that he's been radicalized in that sense.
And you spoke to people who know him.
Correct. I think it's a cocktail of what Chad's saying too, of the overcoming these obstacles that our allies now are having to experience here as they try to assimilate and move forward with their lives. And I just don't. It's not an excuse. Every one of the Zero unit guys I talked to condemned this act, but I don't think it was a targeted. I have no reporting that shows it's a radicalization or that he was sent on a mission or anything.
Kevin, what about you?
Yeah,
I mean, Chad.
Yeah. I mean, even take this specific individual out of the picture. If I was recruiting local sources to fight for us, if I was radicalizing someone, I certainly would use the history of how we treat our wartime allies to incite that radicalization. So whether he was or wasn't radicalized, that we do have a problem that we have to recognize how jihadist groups do radicalize people.
Yeah. Chad Robichaux, Kevin Maurer, thank you both so much. Really appreciate it, because bottom line, you know, we have 2 National Guardsmen, one of whom is dead, one of whom is grievously wounded and still in the hospital. It was a terrible, terrible thing that happened, and we need to get to the bottom of what happened. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.